All right, well, thank you guys for joining us again here for our Q&A session. Once again, we've got Oliver Miller and Bob Bunge and Dana Fellows with us, so thank you guys for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, so
good to be back. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. So we'll go. We have a bunch of questions. You guys asked the audience asked a lot of really great questions, and we'll go through those. So the first question here is from Mark Tormino from. Actually, he doesn't say where he's from. And the question is: does anyone use certification exams as part of the course assessment?
I'll start out. So I taught full-time high school, and then I've been teaching part-time adjunct college for 15 years. When Test Out started the lab sim certs, I immediately start using it as my final. And then I never use any of the CompTIA certs, only because those weren't free and it was hard to get those scheduled at the end of the class. Also, with the Test Out, you got 18 months. And I would tell students, when you get done with the course, go back through practice exams to prepare for the cert after the semester ends. There's another question down below where it said, how do you convince students to take the CompTIA exam? I would really highly encourage them to, crash for the exam after the course ended, but it's hard to follow up with those students because they sometimes disappear and move on to some other class and then get distracted.
From my perspective, this is Oliver. I use the Test Out certification exam as my final. And what it does is and of course the students there assess other ways as well. There are labs in Test Out. There are tests that you have to take, and plus there are customized tests, and I use all three of those, and they're all weighted. And so this means that if the student continues to follow the flow of the course, by the end they could sit, of course, and take that Test Out exam, and that's counted as 40% of their grade, and which is a high percentage, and we do that to force them to keep that flow going. And as I mentioned before, one of the ways I could evaluate them quite quickly is how they're doing on the test, in terms of how they're doing on my custom tests in terms of the grades, right? They need to get 80% or better. If they're able to do that consistently through the 13 exams that I give them, at the end, they sit and they take the Test Out final, and then I could tell whether or not they are ready to take the CompTIA tests. So that's how I use the Test Out as my final, of course, for assessment purposes.
So Lisa Lacker also asked a similar kind of question, just asking if it's common for four-year universities to blend certifications with their curriculums. And I think your answer to that provides it too. Genesee Community College, where you're at right now, Oliver, is a two-year college. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so for four-year universities, do you think the length of the term or semester factors into whether or not you can apply a certification exam within the curriculum, or is that something that's credit hours? How do you factor that in as far as the material and the time they have to cover? Either one of you, Bob or Oliver.
Right. So this is Oliver. I also teach at a 4-year as well. And I'm, of course, teaching engineering students at the 4-year. They do not look at certification. In other words, the students, right, who are graduating, they do not look at certification as their way or their ticket into the field, right? Because, of course, they're coming out with a 4-year degree, so that's their ticket in. I think it's more valuable from a 2-year perspective because, these folks want to kind of get out and get a job and start earning some money. And if they don't have the experience, or a 4-year degree, of course, the next best thing is an industry recognizable cert.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to teach at a couple different 4-years, and one of them was more of a research university, and one of them was more of a professional technical institute. And research university wasn't terribly interested in certification training, but the other one that was more professional technical, their curriculum dovetailed with certifications much more.
So it sounds like it's something that could be done and done well as part of a curriculum in a 4-year university for the students overall. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that kind of Oliver, you touched on this as well. It's about how much time they have to take, and so with your 14-week, I don't remember what you said, semesters, you've got the time to prepare them to take it. So Carol Merchant, she asked this question, and I think we've sort of covered this. It says, she asked, when you say degree, do you mean bachelor's? Will associates work as well? And so Oliver, you did mention that you think that this is probably more of a fit for the 2-year degree. Is that correct?
Oh, that's correct. And you know what, I should also point out too that, you know, a lot of the 2-year colleges that I'm familiar with, they always seem to have, of course, they have a credited side, right, which is the associate degrees, the degrees and so forth. But then there's a non-credited side where, you know, folks from the community could come in and take a couple of classes here and there to either upgrade their skills and so forth. And so, you know, what we try to make sure that the folks on the non-credited side, right, just the average person coming in off the street, that they are aware that, you know, they have this available to them. In other words, yeah, you could take a couple of classes and get a certification. But as we mentioned during the seminar, without some sort of degree under your belt, you're going to hit that, you know, that ceiling when it comes to opportunities for advancements.
Absolutely.
So Arian Firehar asks, is it difficult to require the certification as the final exam in the course if that's something you're implementing? He two-sided question, is that something that how you stand on requiring it? And then the second part of that question is, how do you get students to take it when it's not required as part of their final?
Let me go ahead and speak to how we're handling things.
This is Oliver from.
Oh.
Go ahead, Oliver.
No, I was gonna say this. We sort of our program, we sort of breed that into the students, you know, from day one, and that is the industry recognizes a certification, right? We're trying to get you job ready, and this is part of that particular process, and the industry recognizes that, right? If you do this all the way through the program, right? And I kind of make it clear, you are ready to take that test. Now, the finance in it is a different issue, right? But you are ready if you get an 85 or above on my final to sit for the test, and you're going to pass it, you know, with minimum additional preparation.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we have a very diverse student population that come to us in all stages of their professional development, from absolute beginners to very experienced IT people with different financial circumstances and different life circumstances. So under that situation, I prefer not to require a certification exam as part of the class. We do use certification preparation exams as part of the class. But when it comes to anything that adds an additional cost or creates an additional scheduling issue for students, I like to leave that as a separate matter for them to pursue. We heavily encourage certification. We teach a lot about job search strategies and the value of certifications. But I just don't want to get coupled with anything financial or scheduling on the student side beyond them just taking the class. So I'll lead them right up to the doorway of here's how you get certified, but for them to cross that threshold is a decision that they need to make based on their personal circumstances.
Awesome, great, thank you. So Andrew White, he's got kind of a multi-part question here. He was interested in knowing data on first-time pass rates of community college and tech schools on the most common industry certification exams, such as A+, Security+, Network+. Also was interested in strategies for increasing those exam pass rates and on data on how many community colleges embed certification exams into their curriculum. So and also, this is kind of a long question, but does doing so affect or boost student and faculty commitment and student exam pass rates?
This is Oliver. Somewhat of a long question, but I could tell you what I do, right? And when my students, of course, when they pass the test final, they're given a certificate, right? Nice little certificate. But within passing the final, Test Out has statistics that were generated from your school year over year, as well as comparing, your students to the state, and then comparing your students, I believe, to on a national level, so they could get an idea of where they sit. And I share that statistics with the students.
Looks like Oliver fell off the thing there. As far as pass rates for CompTIA exams, I don't think they publish those officially, but I have read in the past that like the A+ exam, I think it's somewhere in the 40% rate of passing the first time. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if Bob or Oliver knows that stat or not, what the pass rate is for CompTIA exams.
I don't have any statistics on pass rates.
I don't.
Look, I advise students based on my own personal experience of taking cert exams and of coaching people to do that over the years. My general observation is, if you're going to go into a certification exam, be prepared to take it twice, because sometimes you have to take it the first time just to find out what it is. And I would also recommend, like, as far as our classes are concerned, I think all of our classes map closely to some certification or another, but my general recommendation is take another month after the class and cram intensively for the certification exam, because the topic coverage in a class is different than the topic coverage in a certification cram program. We're not as intensively focused on Q&A and having snappy answers to the sort of things that are going to come up on the exam. So I think additional side study beyond what we do in school is a very good idea. A test out's good for that because the students have access to the curriculum for months after the class is over, so they can go back and redo everything a second time, which I think would be highly recommended for passing any of these certifications.
Great. Is it my turn or yours, Maria? Did we lose you, Maria?
Maria's on mute.
Maria, you're muted.
That would make it tough for me to. You covered the last question, right, Justin? Okay, so Tarina Carrick asks, are there any recommendations or particular sources to encourage students along these same lines? She mentions that they communicate the value of certifications to students. They offer vouchers for certifications, and instructors communicate, just like you're talking about telling the students to do it, but it seems like the students aren't taking the exams. She notes that there's ample research out there that illustrates the value, particularly as it relates to employability and earning potential. But are there additional recommendations along with that when you talk about leading them to the door that can help encourage them to add that to their resumes and make the effort to go ahead and get the certification as well.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. This is Oliver. One of the things that I've been trying to work with my director on is, for example, those students, because you're going to get this bell curve of learners, right? And the ones towards as I was saying, what I was trying to convince my direct supervisor or dean to do is that those top students, right, who sometimes score 100% on the test out final. Perhaps we could offer them some sort of a voucher to take that particular test as a way of enticing them to go ahead and sit for the CompTIA test. And it has not been successful because, coming from industry as I am to academic, they got a lot of rules in place, surrounding things like that. So I'm still pushing that as a way of enticing those top performers to go ahead and take that industry cert.
Great. And this next kind of question kind of goes along with that. Gus Pena asks, are you aware of any resources that can help students pay for these industry certification?
Oh, I know that there's foundations like the community college I still teach at part-time. They have a foundation that will help a student pay for a cert. Because so many students sometimes don't take it serious and only smaller percent want to pursue it, they don't advertise it a whole lot. But if they went to the foundation, which is kind of a charitable thing, they will reimburse the student if they take the exam and pass it. So there are some things out there, you just got to look. I also had community members on my advisory board who offered a business would offer to sponsor a couple vouchers for students. And then I think the teacher can maybe identify those students that are really passionate about maybe wanting to take the cert but don't have the funds. So those are some things I did.
So those are some good suggestions. Oliver? Oh, for a second, I thought you were going to add something to that. I know later on there's another question that asked.
Oh yeah, I was, but then I kind of held back because I thought you were going to ask. What I was going to suggest is that what we've done is we've become. I signed our school up for CompTIA, becoming like a CompTIA partner, and when you do that, you're allowed discounts for vouchers on all of their exams. And what I make sure the student understands is that, this is, if you're going to take that CompTIA test, you need to be prepared for it. And one way to be prepared for it is by showing that you did decently on the test out final. But when you do that, there's a cost associated with it. And, for example, if you take the core 1, core 2, and the A+, those are 2 separate tests. And the market rate for those, I think, is a little over $200. So when your school is a CompTIA partner, that rate drops down to, I think, about $180 times 2, versus over $400. So that's one way I try to let them know that there's a lot of value behind doing well on the test out exams.
Awesome.
We're part of the CompTIA voucher program as well. So we distribute vouchers to students for various CompTIA certs.
Wonderful.
Yep.
So it sounds like that's a good association along with some of the others that you do. Later on there is a question for if there's discount for certification costs for students.
Yep.
Kathy Powell asked that, so
Maria,
that's good to know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not the vouchers are not just for students, right? I mean, they have on their site a lot of train the trainer type programs available for instructors as well. And I've sat through them, and I think they're changing it around this year, but if you sit through it, and this stuff is like 40 hours, right? So you have to sit through it. You're able to get a voucher that's CompTIA. So for teachers and students, right, there's benefits to be part of that partnership.
Definitely. I know for Test Out, there is a discount code for a student that purchases a CompTIA voucher for one exam. That's just Test Out 2020, I think. Is that correct, Dana? We might need to clarify that to make sure that the code is correct. But we have a code to offer additional 10% discount on a purchase of a CompTIA code as well, that I know is not well known, but something that could be shared also.
Yeah, I don't, I should know that answer, but I don't know what that is for sure off the top of my head.
Okay, well, we'll double check and research that to make sure that we're giving the correct one out here. Okay.
Well, this next question came from Gary Weber. It's about the DoD. He says the DoD has begun accepting PC Pro and Security Pro in lieu of the CompTIA exams. Do instructors push this idea?
I actually was not aware of that. I'd like to hear more or see where that came from.
Yeah, I had never heard of them either. That's interesting.
I haven't heard that one either.
I do know.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to add that I haven't heard of that one, but because the systems in the military are extremely technical now, subcontractors as well as main contractors are required to have some sort of IT training certificate under their belt. Now, I don't know, as the reader mentioned there, is that the minimum, which I have to look into that, but the security plus certificate, I think the SYCA, those are minimums under the DoD. I forget the regulation that they have.
Yeah, my general recommendation for students is, first of all, there's no such thing as a bad certification on your resume, so more is better. But in particular, my observation for job postings in government or anything military or security related is there a heavier orientation towards certifications on the resume than maybe private sector. So the more students leaning into government or cybersecurity or military, the more I'd recommend getting as many formal certifications as possible.
Good recommendation. I know that we do have several military academies or schools that are, or military bases that are reaching out to academic schools for training for those certifications that utilize Test Out's courseware materials and passing the certification exam prior to accessing, because they've got a higher trade-off between the time spent on doing that material and studying it and being able to obtain a certification. I don't know what the acceptance level is on that, but I know that they're utilizing that in military programs now.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
next question. How do you manage new, I'm assuming new students, compared to those trying to do career change? That's a question by Jacob Orox. And along those same lines, Paul DeCare says, what about older students?
I might be able to help with this one, because when I taught college courses, you'd have a factory shut down or something, and I'd have all of a sudden a new semester start, and I have like 10 students sitting there in the range from 30 to 60. They just got laid off from like back home, there was a printing company that went out of business. And the one day a lady said to me, she goes, "You don't know what it's like." And I said, wait a minute. So I was in my 30s, worked for a steel mill. I was a design draftsman. the company closed and I got laid off. And I officially changed my career from doing CAD work, or design mechanical design, and I went more into technology. So I was in my 30s and I switched careers, had little kids at home, married. And so I wasn't like trying to play down what she was saying. I was just saying, yeah, I do understand what it is. And I was really motivated, really passionate. I really knew what I wanted to do, and I made it work. And so what I did each semester after that, I shared my story with the students from day one, so they knew no matter who they were that they could do it. But I think when you're an older student, sometimes you're sitting, you got multiple things going on in your life. You maybe have lost your job, you got a family to feed, you got no health insurance, you got all this stuff happening. You got to really keep all that stuff in mind, and just you're teaching them. For me, it was like teaching them half the tech part of it. The other half was moral support. Let them know that you understand that they're going through all this other stuff too. And I always kept a closer eye on the older people. Referred them to some of the college resources that I knew about, because at any minute, if they got a mediocre job offer at any time, they could very easily just drop what they're doing to take that job, because it was instant solution to their problems. So those questions kind of hit close to home for me. So.
Yeah, that's a good question. This is Oliver. I started teaching at this college level about 4 years, and what I didn't know at the time was that if you were in high school, right, you could take courses, probably because I never took any college courses while I was in high school, but in any event, you're able to take college courses. So I had high school students, for example, taking my Linux course. And then I have at the upper end of it, I have students, older students, adult learners, right, as we call them, who are, perhaps lost their job or changing careers. I think the biggest challenge between that spread is to keep the younger learner, right, the high school focus, because they're familiar with this stuff, and I don't know where to get it from, but they're familiar with Linux, or they used it before, so they could whip through the material quickly and they're done. My older students, so my challenge is to make sure they're still challenged, right? So we do additional stuff outside the test out area. For the older student, thank goodness that we have what's called a testing center at our college, where all I have to do is schedule the tests, the time and passwords and so forth, and that adult learner could work at their own pace, right? And so, I look at my job as more of an orchestra leader, right? I'm just trying to pace the course all the way to the end. And I tell my adult students, listen, this is probably not the most important thing in your life, right? You have life going on, you have a family, you're working, and all this other issues. So I know this is not the most important thing, but what I could do is that you could pace it, right? Go through the program and just be ready for the test on the scheduled date. Right, so all the other stuff, right, we'll pace it accordingly, and I give them that type of flexibility to take that test. If they're not ready, well, that's okay, right? But the course ends in 16 weeks, and we got a proctor that tests for you. So you let me know when you're ready to take the test, and we'll just schedule it. So that's the kind of flexibility that I guess I'm fortunate for my school offers. The adult learner, as well as the student coming out of high school.
Part of my job description is advising prospective students, and again, we have a diverse community, so I see quite a few students who have 15 or 20 years of technical experience in an older technology, but they got laid off because the division closed or there was a merger or something. And the challenge for that person is to prove that their skills are relevant to today's technology. So I strongly advise them to get a fresh certification on the resume just to prove that they're still happening. okay, that they're not resting on the laurels of things they did 20 years ago. So just from a job search strategy, I really want them to get at least some new certificate just to prove they're up to date. Likewise, for the brand new student, the challenge problem for the brand new student is how do you get your foot in the door for the entry level position? And again, getting some sort of certificate on your resume is a good thing to prove that you have at least some baseline technical skills that would qualify you to a help desk position or some entry level type experience. So I think both for the youngest students and the oldest students, certificates are particularly important because they haven't got the the current relevant experience to trade on as much as somebody who's in mid-career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great. It's really good to hear the different.
Powerful.
Yeah, the different ways that we can work towards any level and any age of student. I love how Test Out is able to, and that you guys have worked your curriculum so you can cater to either that freshly high school graduate or someone who's in their 30s, 40s doing a career change. That's really great to hear. So our next question, I think this stems from the part of our conversation when we were during the webinar talking about getting experience in the industry, and someone had mentioned volunteering. And so this question is from Crystal Gibson from Nogales Community College in New Orleans. She asks, can you give an example of a volunteer tech project?
This is Oliver. As I try to think of one in my mind, I can't come up with a direct one. But what I could tell that listener is there are project-based companies out there. Like for example, what's a big deal today is things along data, right? Data analysis. That type of background is somewhat useful skill set to have. And so, how do you get that type of analysis? Well, you could actually go out and work on a project, right? An online project with a group out there, right? And that overall project that they're working on might be something as mundane as trying to figure out where all the potholes are located in a city, right? To make things a little bit more efficient for the city to fill them, right? Or it could be a complex project, but whatever project that you're associated with, right? You could put that experience on your resume, right? I think I mentioned during the seminar, right? There's a lot of NGOs or nonprofit organizations out there that will welcome volunteer, because the bottom line is that their budgets are cut as well, right? So any type of experience that you have or lack of, you could always volunteer that skill, and they'll welcome you with open arms.
It's great. I know that one of the local universities here close to Test Out is they actually have a lot of internships where local businesses could come and say, I've got this project that I need done and I need interns. And so that's definitely a way that that local businesses could find people to help as well.
I think
Yep.
a lot of local schools that are private, sometimes they're looking for example, they want to recable their building. So they look for volunteers to have people help. Actually, this is hard work, not easy, but pulling cable through ceilings and terminating the ends. So for a networking student, that would be something they could reach out to. A lot of these small schools have a one-man tech crew. And if you're willing to volunteer for a little bit to get some hands-on experience in exchange for your hard work for their knowledge, that's a good opportunity. Something I did over 20 years ago, the local genealogical society was trying to put records into a database, and these are mostly older people who have no clue what a database is. And I created a database where they could do search index records They typed all the records, and I just had to import them into the database and make it searchable. And I did that 20 years ago, and up till about 6 months ago, I was still volunteering for that organization. So you gotta be careful what you volunteer for. It might be a lifelong job. But they finally found someone who put that on the web, made it web-based, which is a lot nicer than what I was doing for them. So.
I think you're up, Maria.
Thoughts on that? That's good. Okay. Let's see. Industry standards continually evolve, and it's a challenge to keep up. And she puts that in context by saying at our understaffed community college, a couple of our courses would be considered cert prep, but some are more generic, and we promote them as aligned with industry certs. Any suggestions on making that transition?
I've got a few suggestions. So the problem space we're in right now is, I think we're at a bit of a generational shift in what the industry certs are all about. This is most prominent in the Windows Server arena, because for 20 years we've been teaching Microsoft certifications, the old MCSE track, where it was, Server 2003, 2008. We're currently teaching 2016 via test out series. Okay, Microsoft themselves, though, has migrated away from the server product-centric certification model toward role-based certification, where everything's based on Azure. So, like right now, I'm teaching Windows certification courses, and the question is, how relevant is that to the current environment? So last night we did an interesting experiment. Over Zoom, I took an entire Windows Server class out, and we looked at job boards like Glassdoor, and we searched on the keyword Windows Server Administration. It was fascinating. As far as like products that they wanted the students to know, there was a lot more interest in things like 2008 server, 2003 server, Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows 8. So a lot of the older product lines are extremely relevant on the resume. So, one thing about the transition I would say is don't be in too big a hurry to discount what you've been doing for years. Because, I didn't see anybody out there asking for Azure certifications. So, it isn't necessarily the case just because Microsoft has shifted things to the cloud in their philosophy. It doesn't mean every Microsoft customer out there is ready for that shift yet. I had one student who got an internship, which interestingly was offered by one of my previous graduates who's now working for a company. And that was a Windows Server-based internship. And I debriefed that student on, well, what did the person ask you in the interview? So part of it was Azure and part of it was classic Active Directory. So, the key thing in transitioning to the cloud is, don't be in too big of a hurry to throw over the older content in order to do everything cloud-based. Now, that being said, the other thing I heard in your question is the understaffed situation of community colleges, and that's where we live also. We have a tiny little networking department. We have to cover a lot of bases with very few personnel. So one thing I do is I leverage free assets like Amazon Web Services Educate, and I get all my students cloud access. And then we couple that with test out curriculum. And so we go do hands-on things in the cloud alongside the test out certification program. So students are getting a taste of the new cloud-based environment and applying, like Windows Server ideas, for example, there. So like we go into Amazon's cloud and we spin up Windows Server 2016. We spin up Windows Server 2019. We take some test out lab that they've done in LabSim, and then we do it for real up in the cloud environment. The students really enjoyed that a lot. So my overall recommendation is leverage what you've got. If you've got physical equipment, if you've got physical labs, keep using them. If you have even older equipment, keep using them, because the businesses out there want people that can support that. But then, get your toe in the water of cloud also, because at the rate things are going, 3 to 5 years from now, that's going to be the only certs out there, at least that's Microsoft's game plan, and the different, I think CompTIA is going to be around for a while, but some of the other verticals is definitely shifting in the cloud direction.
Yeah, I tend to definitely agree with that. What I from my experience, what I've seen in the field is that it's great to have, for example, CCNA certification, and we teach that, right? We're part of their academy, but the reality is that that 200 301 class, cert prep class, it's difficult, right? It's an extremely difficult course to get through. Not to mention it's like 2 semesters, right? But if when that student comes out and they take that CCNA test, great. But the fact is, when they're in the field, even if they pass that test, when they're in the field in real life, no one's going to let them touch their servers, right? I mean, they're not going to be doing any subnetting, right? And especially you're not going to be, directly doing any type of configurations on Cisco routers. Yeah, they, have a good market share, but there are other routers providers out there, right? So from my perspective, I would rather, and I've talked to my manager about this, I would rather see us kind of throttle back a little to the network plus, right? If you take the security plus, it's not directly focused on anyone's technology, right? It gives you that overall scope of security, right? And the network plus kind of does the same thing, gives you the overall scope, not equipment agnostic. And I think the folks that are doing the hiring, right? Yeah, they will take a CCNA person, over a network plus person. But the fact is that not too many of our students are sitting for the CCNA because it requires a lot of prep afterwards. So general, the A plus, it's more of a general type test, right? No equipment focus is essentially used. Of course, Linux is different, right? We're focused on Linux, but security plus, general, right? The network plus that I'm hoping we're going to, general, instead of focusing on, one vendor's equipment.
I think a key, it says under staff community college, that's the case a lot of places. And I think your best bet is to, as long as you have like the CompTIA A plus, network plus, security plus, the different certification objectives that you can map your courses to, and you hope that the research that CompTIA does as far as what's going on in the industry, what subject matter experts are saying, what industry is saying, you hope that they're current. So going back to understaffed, you don't have time to have do all that research yourself and have an advisory board and spend hours of meetings when you don't have time. So I think as long as you're kind of mapping some of these basic certs, that's a good start. But I agree. Microsoft says we're going to the cloud, but a lot of people are saying not so fast. We can't afford the cloud. We have servers that are doing just fine for what we need, and it appears that they'll keep doing fine for the next several years. So.
Well, thank you for that. That was very insightful to hear just those different perspectives. So thank you. The next question is from Lisa Latcher. She asks, do you have any idea about IBM Skills Academy certificates? It's not something I've heard of. All right, and we can.
I think I was going to say I may have come across that a while back, and I thought kind of related it to, you have a lot of these what they call MOOCs that are out there, these massive online training classes you could take, 150,000 people in these classes, and I think the skill is something like a button. I could be wrong, but I didn't remember it was like a button that you would get for taking these types of IBM type classes. I have not seen or come across whether or not the industry accepts those certs or not. So.
Okay. Along that same line, does the ITIL certification provide value in IT careers?
I think it does, but I think we have to remember that that type of certification is more like of a framework, right? Well, what it tries to do is blend IT and business together, right? So it's a good certification that shows that you do have hopefully some business background as well as technology background, because as we always say, technology, that's not the solution, right? The business is what the organization is trying to run. They just happen to use technology to help them with their goal. So if you come through the door with a certification that looks at business and technology, yeah, you're definitely ahead of the game. But again, most entry-level people, they're not thinking along those lines, right? That's more of a cert that you would get if you're making that transition from, say, business and wanted to pick up or show on your resume that you do have some fundamental knowledge of IT. I think that's a good cert to get.
Thanks. Appreciate Patricia Courtney that asked that question. Thanks.
And I think this next question is probably one that Maria and I will need to answer. It says, I was wondering if you can share with us monthly articles which we can post on our website, another format to promote the importance of certification. So when Cody Clark was on with us, he's the managing editor for Cert Magazine. And so Certification Magazine posts articles every month, or sorry, once a quarter. But lots of really great articles, things that people can use. So certmag.com or Go Certify, those are two really good websites that instructors can go to get those types of articles. Do you guys have anything else you can add to that?
Didn't you folks have a couple of posters that you sent out at one time?
Yeah, we actually on our support page we have a whole bunch of posters that are downloadable and can be printed off.
Yeah. So before COVID, one of the things, and I remember that because in our lab, my manager gave me a wall, right, which had a lot of stuff up there. But what I wanted to do was actually create like what I was going to call a wall of fame, where we would post the test out stuff. Along with the certificates of students who've actually passed the class, to kind of put it up on that wall to show those incoming students that, hey, this is possible. And in fact, there was a special release that they had to sign off on that, which the students did. But unfortunately, the COVID hit, and we didn't get a chance to execute it fully. But that was my plan, to show this wall of fame with all these test out folks that passed the test out certs on it.
And I know a lot of people are actually to have those walls, and so hopefully if this COVID thing ever ends, we can go back to that.
Right. Perhaps there's some that's an idea for us to take back as test out, that there's some ways that we could bring that more remotely into the environment where we don't have a physical wall necessarily to promote it, but we could do that with our platform. So we'll have to look at that more closely.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay. This is a simple question for us, for you, Oliver, in particular, perhaps, but Liz Fountain asked at CWU asked, could we get a certification progression chart key for the acronyms? So she would like to know if there's a key to all of the acronyms on the chart to help her with looking at that and explaining it to students.
I do have one that I came up for the CCNA, because students has the same thing. but it's like anything else, right? Those things, they change, right, based on the industry that you're in. I haven't come across a general one specifically for, say, A+, right? I just have one specifically for the terms that are used in, networking. So I don't know if that's any help. And all I essentially did was just Google it, try to find, those types of condensed terms. But it's one of these things where when you're working in it, when you're doing it, right, you're going to get it, right? You're going to get it.
Yep. And we did that chart that you shared with us last week. I did put that on the recording page. So if anyone has any questions about certifications, they can definitely Google those acronyms and things. So,
Perfect.
all right, looks like we got one more question here from William Betchel. He asked, what are your thoughts on cybersecurity?
It's a buzzword. Cybersecurity is the latest buzzword, and it has been for the last couple of years, and it continues to be the buzzword. So, students, I'll tell you one thing. So, people ask me all the time, like, can students jump into the Ethical Hacker Pro or new cybersecurity, Cyber Defense Pro, right away? And I think it goes back, without that really good networking foundation, Network Pro, Network Plus, and we're talking about the CCNA, you got to really have that under your belt before you can, in my opinion, before you can be really successful in the cybersecurity area, because we're assuming what a subnet is, and what ARP is, what DNS, all these basic things, and the cybersecurity courses just take it a one step further. So, like I said, I know teachers that are jumping right into our Ethical Hacker Pro, and the students are getting through it, but they really don't really understand what they're doing in a way. So maybe crawl before you start walking into cybersecurity.
Those basic courses first.
I tell you, so I have a.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. I agree with Dana completely. I teach Ethical Hacker Pro, but I really want students to take everything else first, because you need a lot of IT foundation knowledge for Ethical Hacker Pro to make any sense at all. But I'll say cybersecurity is important. I've had numerous students get hired for various cybersecurity roles, and many of them have gone on to study more advanced beyond the associates level. So there's the unlimited industry appetite for skilled people in cybersecurity, but the catch again is you have to be a very strong IT generalist to really pursue the cybersecurity studies. It's not for someone as a very first course in IT.
Yeah, that is extremely accurate. I think I was looking at the University of Maryland. I think you get a degree in cybersecurity, and I was curious as to try to figure out what that is. When you start looking at the courses, it's the stuff that we're teaching now, right? They just kind of condense it and kind of work you through, but it's the fundamental. And I'll tell you a quick story. I have a 14-year-old son. Because of COVID, he's home now, and I think he's in high school. He enjoys, the flexibility, let's call it, that he has. And he came to me actually 2 days ago and said, Dad, I know what I want to do. I want to be a penetration tester. Well, first of all, I was impressed that he knew what that was. But then, he's thinking in his mind that this is something I just take a couple of classes and do a couple of things and I'm in, right? I go, listen, buddy, you've got to get some fundamentals under your belt. And I tell him, I said, listen, I have machines that have Linux on there, and we talked about you learning that, right? You haven't done that yet. I said, that's how you have to start. If that's the path you want to take, you got to get the fundamentals, and I think a lot of people, they hear that buzzword and they see the demand that's out there, and all of a sudden they want to jump into it. And I also explain to my students that, if computers and IT is something that, we're all in this because we love this stuff, right? And I tell them that, you've got to be in this not for the money. The money's going to come, but there's a lot of learning that you've got to get underneath your belt. And once you get that learning underneath your belt, people will pay you for that skill set, right? But if you go in there with the intention of, because they have very, very low employment, the salaries are high, you're going to last a year, maybe 2 years, and find out, I don't like doing this. So I try to give the students those cores, values, if you will, before they even get into this field. It's great, but if you don't love the stuff, you're going to be in and out and wasted a lot of money trying to learn something that you have no intentions of enjoying.
And the good thing of those basics, they'll help you to know if you want to do it or not, if you're going to enjoy it. There's actually there's this website that we share with people sometimes, and it says that there are currently 521,617 open jobs in cybersecurity nationwide. So it's definitely something that if it is interesting to you, it's worth pursuing for sure. All right, so it looks like we got through all the questions there. Maria, this next part, and we are past the top of the hour, so
we are. These were some additional comments that were made on the questions or answers that were given for them that I thought might be valuable to share with this Q&A section, but we don't necessarily need to review them for the recording for us here. So now you've got some of the thoughts of other instructors that shared some things too, or a response that Test Out gave to a couple of questions on there. But just helpful additional insights that I would think would be worth sharing in the Q&A.
Okay, yep, I'll definitely post those on the here. Just on the recording page. So
okay,
great.
Any other thoughts just from these particular questions that have come to any of you that you'd like to add in addition to this? It's been pretty thorough. I feel like some excellent questions answered about what's going on. I'm just wondering if there's any additional things that have come to your mind as we've discussed answering these questions.
I'd say that certifications are like a snowball effect. I get my students taking the PC Pro certification, Network Pro, Security Pro. They get those through, they build confidence, and then they're more apt to spend a couple $100 or up to $350 or whatever the prices are for whatever cert they take for the CompTIA, and then continue on and building a portfolio or stacking those certs. So that's why I liked when I was still a teacher and Test Out, launched the lab sim certification. I loved it because it gave students that confidence and that experience of doing a test under pressure, timed, knowing that it's kind of like one shot in a way. So yeah, like I said, it's a snowball effect, and it builds momentum as they build up and get more of them.